This is one of the best alien invasion stories. This is a very quiet, understated invasion, which makes it all the creepier.
Hello and welcome to the Gopherwood Lounge. Come on in out of the rain. This is Arc Press Senior Editor DJ Butler. I'm here with Arc Press Senior Editor David Afsharirad, David AF, as he's AKA'd in the exosphere. Before we get into our subject matter, I want to invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and go to arc.press to sign up for the mailing list. Today, we're going to talk about 7 science fiction books that you will love.
You will love. And by the way, before we jumped on here, Dave, I hopped on, and as best as I can figure, there's something like 80,000 science fiction novels for sale on Amazon. So everybody listening to this or watching this, we're only talking about 7 of those 80,000 plus that are available. Of course, many science fiction novels also out of print. So, this is a small drop in the bucket. So understand if we don't mention a novel that you like, or if one of these 7 that we talk about is not for you, please know that we did that intentionally to upset you. This was malicious on our part, and we just want you to know to please take this as a personal attack on the things you love and your taste. And I, of course, am joking. We only have a tiny little piece of the pie here. Science fiction, such a broad and exciting genre. But we're going to talk about 7 books that we think you'll love. And maybe you already love them. Maybe you've read some of them. And please do pop down in the comments and react to these. We'd love to hear your thoughts on them. But first, I want to hear DJ Butler's thought. What is a science fiction novel that I and the people out there on the internet will love?
So, the first science fiction novel I think you're going to love is Rendezvous with Rama.
Hmm.
It was published in 1973 by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, for young readers especially, this may sort of feel like ancient history. 1973, who is this guy? Arthur C. Clarke was regarded as one of the big 3 with Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein. He was a hard science fiction writer. He was British. I think he was in radar technician in World War II, and spent a lot of his life thereafter living in Ceylon and Sri Lanka. He wrote hard science fiction, which means that the books tend to be more about the ideas and the sort of the science guesses and the technology guesses than they are about the people. And Rendezvous with Rama is an example of that. It's also an example of a phenomenon we see more than once, we'll probably see more than once today, which is science fiction as a kind of a prophecy, trying to guess about things that are going to happen in the future. And this book in particular made this spectacular guess that in 2017 came true. So Rendezvous with Rama is a story. It's set in the 22nd century. It's about 100 years in the future from now, actually. And we have spread there are Earth outposts, or human outposts, not just on Earth, but there's like a government of Mercury, and I think there's a government of Mars. And we detect a cylindrical object entering the solar system. It's 30 miles long. I think it's 20 miles across, so it's kind of this fat cylinder, and it's headed into to pass through close by the sun. And so we send astronauts to investigate, and it doesn't have to a modern reader, it can almost feel kind of plotless in the sense that there's no villain, there's no one trying to destroy anything, and we need to stop that person, right? There's this riddle. What is this giant cylinder? So the Earth astronauts they find the airlocks. They enter the cylinder. There are staircases, and actually there are 3 staircases that go from the airlocks down to the interior of the cylinder. One of the sort of enduring mysteries is why the builders of this object, which the humans named Rama for the Hindu god, right? One of the incarnations of Vishnu, supreme being, kind of primal man. Why the builders of Rama seem to be obsessed with 3. So what happens in the book is sort of straightforward. The interior is a giant plain with vegetation and a frozen sea around the inner part of the cylinder, and the humans slowly start progressing. Well, as Rama nears the sun, the frozen sea melts. They raft across the sea. They find buildings built in sets of three. They start to find creatures, crabs and spiders, who ultimately they dissect one and realize that it's partly biological, partly mechanical, right? Um, they cut into one of the buildings and see holographic images, including what seemed indications that we never see the Ramans themselves, so to speak, right? The race that creates this, but they seem to have some kind of a three-sided symmetry. I think they see a like a three-legged spacesuit or something, as I recall. I may have that wrong. Um, the Rama comes in, goes around the edge of the sun, and then heads back out of the solar system. The government of Mercury gets nervous and fires a nuke, which the astronauts have to sort of intercept. And because there's a 12-minute delay for radio signals to get from Mercury to Rama, they have enough time to defuse the warhead before the Mercurians can detonate it. And then Rama goes on its way, and they go back. Right? That's the whole story. There's no there, like I say, there's no villain. There's this mystery, but when they penetrate the first layer of the mystery, there's just more mysteries, right? It's almost like a little H.P. Lovecraft story. We don't know who the Ramans are. We don't know why this apparently vessel was built. It is compared to Noah's Ark. Fun fact, little thematic for us. Uh, we don't know why it was designed to come in and do it's sort of Star Trek like, the idea of slingshotting around the sun to go faster. I mean, that's it comes in and uses the gravitational well of the sun to turn. Um, so this book was already a classic of science fiction, but then in 2017 it came true. So in 2017, astronomers at a Hawaiian observatory saw a cylindrical object leaving the solar system. Now this is called Oumuamua. It's got a Wikipedia page. If you look up Oumuamua, I think you can find it. Technically, it's got a glottal stop in front, an apostrophe. They called it Oumuamua because apparently that's the whole. Well, the tradition is the astronomers who see an object get to name it, and they gave it a Hawaiian name because they're a Hawaiian observatory, and I think Oumuamua means scout or something like that in Hawaiian, right? Fine. Of course, they should have named it Rama because this thing now it's smaller, but it's something like 900 or 1,000 yards long, and it's cylindrical. So it's this shape. Now we don't know if it's perfectly cylindrical. It was kind of far away when we spotted it, but not a lot of cylindrical rocks. That's interesting, right?
Right.
And from its trajectory, they calculated that it had, in fact, we just missed it. It had come in and turned around the sun just like Rama did, and then left the solar system. And I actually did a panel discussion about this with some astronomers, and I some NASA guys, and I said, "Well, how do we not see it? And then how do we lose track of it? Because this is what happened. The observatory tracked it for a while, and then it disappeared. And the technical answer I got back from a NASA rocket scientist is, Dave, space is big."
That's an interesting answer to the Fermi paradox. Where are they?
Yeah,
Maybe they've been flying by, but space is big.
space is
Um,
big. We just didn't see them.
you just didn't see, we just didn't see them. Uh, Great. Yes, I love Clark. I almost put spoiler alert, Childhood's End is not on my list, but I almost put Childhood's End on my list. I think probably most people know him if they know him as for 2001, obviously.
2001. Yeah.
And also Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious Universe. Was that the name of the show? Man, where he now lives on Sri Lanka, where he ponders the mysteries of this and other worlds. You remember this show they
Yeah.
had on? And Leonard Nimoy had one similar too, where he was like Clark was the host or sort of the frame, and they would talk about the crystal skulls or all these weird things. I remember watching the reruns. We should also say, spoiler alert. I mean, we're talking about books. I won't necessarily. I don't know if we're going to give away the ending of all of them, but um, this would be pretty boring if we just gave you the name and title and author, and then moved on. So we're going to talk about the books, and
Yep.
I'm going to talk about a book now that has it already come true, which is The Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. Are we pod people? How would we know? Anyway, so the original was called The Body Snatchers. Of course, made four times into films with various versions. So the first one, which is the first two are spectacular. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which now the novel will often have that name on it. I think the 70s one, I think, was also, maybe it was just Invasion of the Body Snatchers, no article at the beginning. Then there was the Nicole Kim and Daniel Craig, which was just called The Invasion. Oh, excuse me. First, there was just Body Snatchers. That was in the 90s. And then there's Invasion. So if we make another one, we're going to have to come up with some other. It also influenced that Robert Rodriguez film, The Faculty. And then from my researches, also a film called Assimilate, which I've never seen or heard of. And this is a classic of 50s paranoia science fiction. It is almost a Twilight Zone episode in a way, right? It was written by Jack Finney, who also wrote Time and Again and a few other things. I think this is probably easily his most famous work. Um, it was originally serialized as things were back in the day in Collier's magazine. So often, really even mainstream literary novels, but certainly genre novels would be serialized in magazines. And this was in the November and December 1954 issue of Collier, which Collier's is mainstream glossy magazine. So I mean, it's just wild to think of a um, how different reading habits were back then. That suburban housewife, or whatever, would have Collier's, and it would have a two-part half and half of a science fiction novel in it, right? Um,
Yeah.
this is great. So the premise of the Body Snatchers is it's set in sort of Bay Area, California, although it's a fictional town, and it is follows a guy, and long story short, right? Basically, um, it's a little more unclear in the movie, but in the book, and there's slightly some changes on the different versions of how this works. But in the book, there are these seed pods that land on Earth, and they first land in this town. In the movie, it's Santa Mira. I think it's something else in the book. Um, and what these seed pods do is when you're sleeping, they somehow absorb your essence or whatever, and they grow another version of you, right? There's another Dave Butler, and then the real you turns to dust, essentially, right? And so then, as time goes on, it doesn't take very long. Um, in the term this is where the term pod people, if you hear people refer to people, he's a pod person, this is from Body Snatchers. And then the pod people come out of the pods, and they have they look in every way like DJ Butler. They sound like DJ Butler. They have DJ Butler's memories, but they're sort of emotionless. They're very flat affectation. And the book again goes into a little more detail than the movies do, but the feeling is this is going to happen globally, right? This is how these things reproduce. They float through space, but they don't reproduce sexually. They don't have children, and so they're sort of a one generation, not one generation, but I guess whatever, whoever exists on Earth now, that's it. There's not gonna be any more babies. And so they sort of take over everything, strip the planet of its resources, and then die out. And again, this is just in the book, go to another planet. And this is implied
Yeah.
that they've done this many times. And the I think this is one of the best alien invasion stories. I love alien invasion stories. I think this one is great because it is quiet. It's not a War of the Worlds where, although of course I love War of the Worlds, but you know the Martians land and they're vaporizing people, whatever. This is a very quiet, understated invasion, which makes it all the creepier. And you know, it has since been, man, it's been analyzed out the wazoo, and I think fairly, and I think that's why it works. And I don't know. I know the director, something Siegel, Mike Siegel, maybe, of the film said, "Man, when we were making this, we didn't think of any of these themes. We were just making a science fiction movie, but they're there, right?" And so it's
Sure.
been viewed as sort of like anti-imperialism,
Yep.
or a commentary on imperialism, a commentary on environmentalism, because they kind of just destroy the planets and then move on.
Right.
Of course, when it came out, what's going on? It's been a critique of post-war conformity. It's been a critique of communism, right? So sort of like both sides of that. Are we criticizing post-war America, or are we criticizing the Russians and the Americans are the good folk? Because right, because the thing with it is that you can't tell, right? You cannot tell who is a pod person. And so you're looking at everybody. It's a masterpiece of paranoia. And there's a great line in and also by the way, second time Nimoy has come up. Nimoy is in the 70s film, which is also Donald Sutherland, right? But there's a great line Nimoy gives it in the 70s version, and then I can't remember. There's a psychiatrist, and it's when the main character has tipped to this, and he knows what's up, and they are trying to. He's trying to get out, and he's trying to warn people, and they capture them, and he's you got to stay awake because if you fall asleep, turn into a pod person. Oh no! And they capture him, and they've got him held down, and he's going to give him a shot to put him to sleep. And he says, "You won't get away with this. You know, someone will stop you." And he says, "In another hour, you won't want them to." And like, man, what a creepy thought that you have been the thing you desire, the thing you want, it will change, and then you won't want that thing anymore. And I think this is quite frankly, a commentary on life. Let's go the simplest one. When you're a kid, you girls are gross, you know, right? Or whatever. Or I don't ever want to be whatever. And then you grow up and you become that. And I think we always look at that. I think it not always, but often is in that case maturity and getting older. But what if you were right before? What if, what if the you now is the pod person? And I think it just strikes so deep. And man, what a great. The other thing is spoiler. The 50s were a little bit gentler times, and the studio felt the original ending was too dark. And so they put this little and in the book's ending is happy too. They defeat the pod people. They send them off, to another planet. That's that planet's problem now. We don't, whatever. But the film, the 70s film ends very, very dark. And if you remember it, I won't do the face, but there's a face at the end. And boy, what a great chilling ending. But the 50s film, they made them put a frame story around, right? So in the 50s version, he is talking to the police about this. And then the movie is like a flashback. And then at the end, they're like, we got him. Because, whatever. They are exporting the pods to every town in America, right? Um, and so that's the happy ending. The real ending, the headcanon ending, is how it was supposed to end is he's the only one left in this town and he is bedraggled and sweaty and his hair is in his face and he's pulling these tarps off these trucks and they're full of pods and they're going to every city and town in America and he's like talking about it's like they're gonna take over everything and he says and you're next and you're next and he looks into the camera and he says you're next and that was the real ending of the film, right? Is oh no, are we next? And anyway, I don't know that I think the movie's a classic. I don't know that people have read the book much, and so I think it deserves to be read. And that's my first one.
Albert Finney,
Books.
Body Snatchers.
Jack Finney. Jack Finney.
Oh, Jack Finney. Thank you.
Yes.
Good.
Jack Finney, the Body
Uh,
Snatchers.
Fantastic. It's funny, as you and I were planning this out, we were kind of saying we'll go about 2 minutes a book,
Yeah,
and
no, we've already like wasted
we've
it.
already recorded our entire budgeted amount. So I'll try and go a little faster, but like it is what it is. We'll talk about these books as long as we have, as long as we're inspired. Hi, I'm DJ Butler, senior editor of Arc Press. How would you like to win $10,000? I want to talk to you briefly about the Arc Prize. The Arc Prize is a novel writing contest in 2025. The first thing you need to know is that the theme of the contest is America 2076. That is, of course, the 300th birthday of America, measuring from the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Our plan is to publish the winner on July 4th, 2026, which is to say on the 250th birthday. So your winning novel on America's 250th birthday will be published talking about America at 300. Now, does that date 2076 mean that you have to write some kind of near-term science fiction novel? Absolutely not. You can interpret the theme America 2076 any way you want. Formally, we're launching the prize on March 8, 2025, which is, as we all know, all we writers and editors know, National Proofreading Day. And don't we appreciate those people? And the contest will run for 7 months, 7 full NaNoWriMos to end on National Taco Day, which, as we all know, is October 7th, 2025. Now, let me tease you a little bit more. I said up front you could win $10,000. Actually, the prize is a publishing contract with Arc Press with a $10,000 advance. So if the book does well, you might make more than $10,000 over time. There's more information and will be more information on our website. Information about the contest, information about how to write a proposal, the widget for submitting these materials on our website, which is www.arc.press. That's all from me. I look forward to hearing from you, and good luck. Let me sort of. I had mine written down in kind of an order, but I'm gonna reorder them a little bit to be more or less chronological. So let me stick in the 70s here for a minute with Philip Jose Farmer's "To Your Scattered Bodies Go."
Excellent.
Which is a bit of a mouthful as book titles go. Farmer's an interesting guy. One of the things he really liked, in a sense, classic adventurer heroes. He wrote a Tarzan novel.
It's quite well. He also wrote, what's the name of that book where it's Tarzan and he put everything in, but it's also like just incredibly pornographic. You know about
I
this?
haven't read this one, no. Which
It's like it's the craziest. Anyway, go ahead. I can't remember the name of it now.
all right, maybe it'll occur to you. So that kind of impulse, that sort of love of classic adventure, shows up in a bit. So "To Your Scattered Bodies Go" is the first book of a series which is called River World. That's one word, River World. Um, and the premise is this: every human being who's ever lived on Earth is simultaneously resurrected at the age of 25 on this other planet, and the planet is entirely a river. So over the course of several books, there's people explore. Book two gets fun because Sam Clemens becomes the one of the main point of view characters, and he has it's sort of Sam Clemens of the Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, sort of Yankee ingenuity, right? Um, Ultimately, we realize everybody is on a river. It's the same river. These rivers are in deep canyons, and there's a whole planet where all it is a river that threads its way around the entire planet, right? And ultimately, by the end of the first book, it's not apparent why this has happened. In fact, really, the main characters are trying to solve that mystery ultimately. Um, the ultimate answer is going to be that aliens set this up as a moral test for the human race, right? Is what's going on, and the planet's totally artificial. Although there is soil, right, the river flows over rock and dirt, and there are plants. But if you dig down very far at all, you hit this some kind of super advanced alloy that you can't break, right? So the world is cast out of metal and then sort of terraformed on the top. And the food is provided. Everybody has a little container. You're resurrected. First of all, you're 25. Secondly, you have this thing they call them grails, and uh, regularly placed along the river are these sort of like charging stations. They call them grail stones, but it's a rock that if you put your grail on it at a certain time of day, it is filled with your sort of necessities of life, food and drink and like tobacco and other stuff. Okay.
The necessities, right?
The necessities,
The
yeah.
back. Yeah.
And so book one follows, so in that kind of like, this is a guy who liked adventurers. This is the series where he writes about some real world adventurers. Samuel Clemens is the one of the main characters of book two. To Your Scattered Bodies Go, the main character is Captain Sir Richard Francis Burton, who is a real world person. His biography is amazing. The guy won fencing medals for inventing a fencing maneuver. He discovered the sources of the Nile. He did the pilgrimage to Mecca in disguise. In fact, at the age of 30, he was planning. He had been, as a young man, he was in the East India Company Army. And they paid bounties if you learned a language, right? And so he found he was good at it. So he just learned a whole bunch of Indian languages. And so he wanted to do the pilgrimage to Mecca. Wrote, I think, a 2-volume book about it. The guy wrote tons and tons of books, um, and including like a history of the sword. And so at the age of 30, right? So he's going to go on the pilgrimage to Mecca. He doesn't want anyone there to sort of realize that he's a white guy. He's English. I think his mom's side, he's Irish gypsy. He's Irish traveler is what he is. So he's going to go in disguise as an Afghan doctor, so that his accent in Arabic, they will attribute it to him being Afghan, right? So at the age of 30, in preparation, he goes and has himself circumcised, right? This is like he's a hard man, this guy, Richard Burton. Uh, and he's the protagonist of book one. And ultimately, and one of the things he realizes at a certain point is that when you die, you are resurrected again. You just show up somewhere else again in your 25-year-old body, right? Um, and Burton calculates the length of the river and realizes that he as an explorer, this is who he is, right? He's discovered the sources of he went to the source, find the sources of the Nile. By the way, on that journey, he had a spear shoved through his head, and he survived, and he had scars on his cheeks from where the spear went through his head. Again, this is like a real world, Tarzan, John Carter kind of guy. So he does the math and realizes that if he's trying to find the source of the river, it is just too long for him to like sail the river and eventually find it. He won't,
Mhm.
right? So he starts killing himself. And he calls it the Suicide Express, and he kills himself, resurrects, asks questions to determine whether anyone has seen the source of the river. No, not here. Okay, kills himself again, right?
Because he comes out of different places. Is
Because
that
then
the?
he comes to a
Yeah.
different
Okay.
random place somewhere on the
Yeah.
planet, right?
Hmm.
So again, so it's got that kind of pulp adventurer sensibility, but it uses real world people, and it's this big kind of thought experiment, right? How could you have a world that is one giant river? How would you explore it, et cetera? Just
Was
a lot of fun.
was he? Did he do the? I think it's. Is this part of? And was this farmer? Was it the Wald Newton family stories? Where it's sort of like this. We'd have to look it up, I guess. I think maybe so. And I wonder if this isn't part of it. But he sort of what this recalls, and then again some of the other like although it was very pornographic, that it's not just like Tarzan and somebody else. Tarzan and Dracula, Tarzan and he kind of was the
That's the kind
proto.
of thing I think Farmer would write, Tarzan meets Dracula sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, he was sort of the proto League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right? The Alan Moore
Yes.
graphic novel. Like this really kind of came from Farmer as I recall, right? So
Yep.
in books like this and then the others. So well, cool, man. Yeah. Okay.
Not yet made into a movie.
So someone optioned that. Okay, so I'm gonna go next. I'm gonna go to Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. It was sort of I kind of flipped a coin between that and Cat's Cradle, another for my Vonnegut entry. And this was coming out in 1969. I think this is his best novel, which is why I ultimately kind of went with it. Um, The concept of this is it was based on Vonnegut's life. He was in World War II. He was at the firebombing of Dresden, right, and survived it. And so this is sort of his writing about that. But it's a war novel. It's pretty much an anti-war novel, really. Vonnegut was, pretty vehemently pacifist or anti-war, however you want to word that. Probably anti-war is more accurate. Um, but it is satirical. It's darkly funny. It's really moving, and it is really unconventional, right? And so the first line is it will I think as I was preparing for this, consider one of the it's in the top 100 first lines of novels, which is great, and it's all this happened more or less, right? Um, which is such a cool opening line to me. And then the thing I remember that I kind of thought was because there's sort of like a little bit of a frame around it, too. But the line I remember is kind of the first section after the frame. So the frame story starts all this happened more or less. Um, and then sort of the main crux of the story, the first line is listen, colon, listen, Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time, or unstuck from time, right? I can't remember which it is now. Um, which people have pointed out sort of harken back to Beowulf. Listen is like the first word of Beowulf, right? And one thing reason I picked it's kind of Billy Pilgrim is this guy. He's a soldier. He survives the firebombing in Dresden, but and you don't really even know how much of this is true. Believes he has been abducted by aliens and taken to the planet Tralfamador, and that in this he has come they either they intentionally or it just happens that he comes unstuck from time, so he does not experience time linearly. He jumps around, and so every section of the book, it's sort of Pulp Fiction. It's not told in order, and he lives certain parts of his life again and again, and he kind of does this throughout the entire book. And the thing I love I mean, there's a lot to love about it. There also are some recurring Vonnegut characters. I don't know if they show up here first, but Elliot Rosewater is in here, and then also Kilgore Trout, which is a famous Vonnegut character who was sometimes main character, sometimes not, who is a science fiction novelist, sort of based on Theodore Sturgeon, hence Trout and Sturgeon, is in here. But the thing I love about this book, and same thing with Cat's Cradle, is just the utter audacity of it, right? It doesn't tell it in order. He draws pictures, doodles are part of the novel. Um, and they're often, and this is true of all Vonnegut's books, and I think it works best in these two are the best two, Cat's Cradle and Slaughterhouse Five. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments, but you know, but just they're these short little, just tiny little fragments, all kind of put together in this mosaic, and I think um and in the way of directly addressing the reader, listen, and he has also this sort of refrain of so it goes that he says throughout the book, so it goes, which really kind of became a catchphrase for some of the counterculture stuff, I think, really, right? And it's a interesting 3 word uh thesis statement on life too. And anyway, but what I love is again the audacity, and we always talk about story, and there's absolutely a story here, but this is a book that is style,
Yeah.
and it is in your face, and it's probably not going to be for everybody. It's going to annoy some people, but
Yep, for sure.
yeah. But anyway, so Slaughterhouse Five, Vonnegut.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's interesting. Um, the Beowulf starts listen. I mean, another possible, and I have no idea. Presumably, Vonnegut I mean, actually, really, in an ideal world, a writer would never talk about his own book. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to put it out there
Yeah.
like it exists and other people can talk about it. But in the real world, we're often called upon to promote our books, and so it happens, right? So I
Mhm.
don't know what Vonnegut has said about this, but the other parallel, as you were saying, that struck me was Deuteronomy 6 and the Shema, right? The sort of basic statement of profession of in the book of Deuteronomy, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, God is one, right? That's it.
Mhm.
Man, that book, the um I'm not him, so I can talk about what I think the theme is. But for me, you talk about him being anti-war, right? But for me, the sort of great theme is, man, war is so bad, it doesn't just damage the protagonist physically and mentally. It's a cosmic wound. It
Yeah.
it disconnects him from time, right?
Yeah.
Firebombing of Dresden is such a horrific thing that it wounds the cosmos, right?
Yeah.
And then we see these consequences playing out in the life of Billy Pilgrim. So anyway, what a great choice. What a great choice.
All right. Well, over to you.
Here we go. My third one actually also has a very famous first line, which is the sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel. Um, and one of the fun things about that is such an evocative line in 1984 when the year the book was written, and now it doesn't mean anything.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Right? Because if a TV is a dead channel, that's bright blue.
Yeah.
Um, but more likely than not, I'm not sure my kids have ever watched TV as such, right?
Hmm.
They watch some kind of channel that streams on the internet, so there's no dead channel. Of course, at the time the comparison was static, right? That's what it was
Right.
is gray static. So this is Neuromancer. Written by William Gibson, famously written on a mechanical typewriter. I think he may still write on a mechanical typewriter. This book is the people argue. Well, it certainly wasn't the first cyberpunk because it was Gibson's debut novel, and it was launched with kind of no fanfare, and then by word of mouth grew to be a perennial bestseller. Right? I'm 100% sure it's still in print today, with its sequels, Count Zero and Mona Lisa Overdrive, which make the Sprawl trilogy. So it was his first novel, but it wasn't his first story. He wrote the short story Johnny Mnemonic. Is Burning Chrome a separate story, or is Burning Chrome as a collection of other stories that included Johnny Mnemonic? I forget. But in Johnny Mnemonic, uh, we meet the character Molly Millions, who's a sort of cybernetically enhanced assassin, and she shows up then in Neuromancer. So he himself had already written some stories in the genre, and arguably so had others. So this may not be the beginning of the cyberpunk genre, but it's kind of like the genre was out there and coalescing, and this is the book that brought it into
Yeah.
focus. And it's like, oh, cyberpunk is going to be this, right? It's going to be sort of near future. It's going to be technological advancement, but societal decay, and with some particular ideas about technology, including virtual space, right? The idea that networks of machines would create something analogous to physical space was an idea that was just kind of coming into view. And I think Gibson coins the term cyberspace to
I
describe,
think that is right. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Which and again, it's kind of funny. The guy didn't write on. I mean, Jerry Pornell was writing on word processors. William Gibson wrote on a typewriter. So,
Mhm.
nevertheless,
There is like a long line of Luddite science fiction writers, though, right? Like, I'm not
yeah.
that he was a Luddite. I mean, 84 is pretty. A lot of people were writing on typewriters, but
But I
still.
think he might still be. I'm not sure.
Right.
I don't know that. This is probably someone will Google and immediately say,
Someone will tell us in the comments. Truck on down to the comments and tell
yeah,
us about
and
William
tell us how we're
Gibson.
wrong. Uh, yeah. So, but also, and this stuff is still very kind of cutting edge, but like the artificial enhancement of human beings by sort of, deliberate performance enhancing prosthetics, chips in your brain, stuff like that. A lot of what will become cyberpunk cliches appear here for the first time and are not cliches. The idea that a console cowboy, again, I think that's a phrase he coins, would himself have a jack, just like an amp or a or a terminal, and he would plug in and mentally directly interface with the computer. Um, it's short. It's one of the I think one of the reasons it well is because it was written and rewritten and uh, ended up with very spare, efficient kind of prose. So it kind of almost feels, some even some great fun fantasy science fiction classics are in fact kind of pulpy and can in fact be, maybe not always the best writing. This is actually pretty great writing. The story, there's a story. It's almost secondary in terms of like what is great about this book, it is a heist story, a kind of uh, you know a console cowboy who's kind of already been busted once and is kind of living at the margins, gets recruited for this heist. Spoiler, it turns out that the point of the heist is actually that there is a sort of next generation artificial intelligence that's been created that exists in a split two-part embryonic form. And the heist is actually about connecting the two parts of the AI into one. And it ends up with a kind of a simultaneous cyberspace action sequence with some people who are on board, like the military, the former special services commander, who is in a space shuttle, a satellite in outer space, doing things in physical space to connect these two halves of the AI. So, if you like, say, The Matrix, okay, movies,
Does
think
anyone like the Matrix movies, or do people like the Matrix?
if
I
you
don't
like The Matrix, are there sequels? I don't know, Dave. What are you talking about? It's kind of like Indiana Jones, a series that has only one movie. Just kidding. We could fight about that another
We'll
time.
have we'll have a six-part podcast on Indiana Jones, and we will lose every follower that we have.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah,
Um, we should have that conversation. That'd be fun. Maybe get Christopher on or something.
yeah,
But if you like the Matrix, this is the Matrix before the Matrix. A lot of the Matrix kind of it doesn't have that kung fu style. Um,
yeah. They kind of brought that wuxia kung fu
yeah, but
and
the
married it.
idea, yeah, the virtual space, the being jacked in, all that stuff really goes back to Neuromancer. And because it was written in the 80s, my man, the specter of Japan looms large over this trilogy. Like this was at a time, spoken as someone who lived through the 80s, there was this sort of belief that Japan was going to take over the world. We were not really paying attention to the fundamentals of it, like their demographic decline, right? And I think their debt funded over expenditure on infrastructure, whatever, right? It didn't happen. But for a few years there, everything was all
Yeah.
about Ronin and samurai and ninjas and karate, and this came out in that time. So if you're like, oh man, there's like a lot of Japan here, yeah, welcome to the 80s.
Yeah.
But
It's
neuro,
it, it's interesting that you say, how you kind of like there's also a cool story, which it is, but it is interesting. That is one of those books that is it is known for its cultural significance, both in the
yep,
field and I think just in wider media, right?
yep,
Less than about the characters of the story, right? Um,
right.
Interesting. Yeah.
In
Okay,
fact, the more
I'm gonna
memorable
do
character is probably Molly Millions, who is the female assassin, who is a secondary character. The
yeah,
main character case is like
yeah,
almost kind of forgettable.
right. Okay, I'm gonna do one. So I have got What Mad Universe by Frederick Brown. And this is Frederick, Fredric, was how I spelled his name. Brown is Brown. And I kind of think it's my one of my unofficial life missions to get people to not forget Frederick Brown. He was a wonderful writer in the 40s and 50s mostly. Um, Wrote into the 60s some. He is the rare writer that is kind of equally known then and I think now, even for mysteries and science fiction, maybe the science fiction has edged out the mysteries today. He's actually more popular for mysteries back in the 50s, but it also was a bigger market back then. Um, so he wrote the great series of mystery novels, the Am and Ed Hunter novels. He wrote a lot of standalone mysteries. They are all, I don't say they all, but many of them are very weird too. Um, the mystery novels. They're not straight hard boiled. They often have sort of the weird mystery where it feels almost supernatural, but then it isn't element to it. There's a lot of psychological madness and or thinking you've gone crazy in his books. He wrote um he also is known for in science fiction writing, kind of inventing the flash fiction as we in the genre think of flash fiction. There's some literary forms of it, but sort of like a whole story in 500 words. He wrote these like little 500 500 word stories that have like a big twist at the end. And they're all spectacular. Nest for Press Northeast Science Fiction Association or whatever has put out 2 volumes that you can get of his complete science fiction stories and then the complete science fiction novels. He only wrote about 5 science fiction novels. He wrote far more mystery novels than science fiction. Anyway, What Mad Universe was his, I think it may be his first or second science fiction novel. I cannot remember now. It came out in 1949, and this is sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, long before Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in that it takes every stereotype and trope from golden age science fiction and mushes them all together, and he's satirizing it, but he's it's also a love letter to it, right? And what's sort of amazing is how he makes it all work, right? He takes all these disparate elements and mushes them together. And the concept is it's a multiverse story. There's a in the world that we would know, a science fiction magazine editor, and he sort of like an experimental rocket or something, or the gyrus, some sort of engine on whatever, I don't know, lands on him. And the explosion of it is big enough to kind of rip space time and transport him into this other alternate universe, which looks a lot like ours, except that it is the universe of like amazing stories and astounding science fiction from the 40s, right? So there are Lunarians and Martians and Venusians and he gets mistaken for an Arcturian spy, right? And there's these beautiful, and like the women wear like, these sort of if you've seen the old pulp, basically naked, right? Because they were very spicy, and he's kind of scandalized. But they're astronauts at the same time. So they're like female astronauts, but they're Betty Grable with just like the tiniest bikini, but under like a clear space. Because, that's the draw back in the day.
Of
And so
course.
it's hilarious, but it also works as a pulp novel, right? So it's sort of so I found this great quote on Wikipedia. Wordsmith, who I'm sorry to say I don't recognize immediately, but he said Cervantes sought to write a satire on the chivalric romances, a very common literary genre in his time. He ended up creating Don Quixote, one of the finest of the fictional knights errant, the best of them in the view of many. Frederick Brown's satire of space opera is a satire, all right, but still it is among the finest examples of space opera. And I think that really sums it up, right? It's a satire of a genre, but is in some ways still one of the best examples of that genre. Another quick note, and then we'll move on to, I guess this will be the last one, the seventh one, Dave.
Seven, yeah.
Um, that is one of my other favorite authors, Lawrence Block, who's a crime writer. He has a series character called Bernie Rodenbar, who's a burglar. And Block recently wrote an introduction to the Mysterious Press's classic crime library edition of Frederick Brown's first mystery novel, and his first novel, which is great, called The Fabulous Clip Joint. Block is older. He's in his 80s now. He's retired. He's been retired a few times though, so we'll see. I do think it might stick this time. But he was retired at the time. Okay, fine, Otto. He told Otto Pinsler, I'll write this intro. He kind of got interested in Frederick Brown. I said, I hadn't read Frederick Brown in years and years. I read everything. And for whatever reason, this Bernie Rodenbar novel popped into his head. where Bernie, the same kind of thing happens. He gets into an alternate dimension, and so those Bernie Rodenbar novels are sort of cozy. They're very fun, funny novels. That's probably not the one to start with, but it is if you like the Bernie Rodenbar books and aren't aware of that, you should check them out. And maybe, well, why not start with it if you want to? So that's my pitch for Frederick Brown and What Mad Universe.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, so here we go. So, choice number seven. And again, some of you will say, you never talked about Orson Scott Card, or you never talked about. Yes, you're right. There we left, tell us in the comments. Here's our pick number seven. It's Dan Simmons' Hyperion, so published in 1989. Um, here's the setup. Hyperion is a planet at the edge of sort of civilized space. There's a civilized human space empire. I think it's called the hegemony. And Hyperion is a remote, distant planet at the edge of barbarian space. I think they're called the Ousters, are the humans who live outside of the hegemony. And in fact, as the book opens, an ouster invasion threatens Hyperion. So Hyperion is going to be taken over imminently. Now, what is Hyperion? Hyperion is a destination, is a pilgrimage destination. Okay, there are time tombs, a location on Hyperion that seems to be moving backward in time, and that is guarded by a metallic entity called the Shrike. And the Shrike is believed to be able to grant a wish. So people make pilgrimages to the time tombs to ask the Shrike for their wish. So this is the setup, and the result then, and that's the setup, and also sort of the frame story is that this is the last pilgrimage before the Ouster invasion is going to take out Hyperion. Okay. And then what you get is a Canterbury Tales kind of situation where basically you have sort of six novella or novelette length stories that lead us to understand why each of these characters has come on a pilgrimage, right? And there's like an artist and there's a warrior, and so you get like the artist's tale, the detective's tale, right? And just to give you just a little sense, one of my favorites is the priest's tale, which is the first one. And there are two priests in the story. I think it's Duray and I'm forgetting some other. It's like a French name and an English name. So the first priest is a guy, and he's I don't think he's there. He's all in backstory. Is a guy who had been sort of exiled to Hyperion for committing a fraud, and the fraud was archaeological. He had faked evidence that when we went to a world and encountered a new civilization, that somehow Christianity was already there, right? He sort of faked this evidence that Christianity was galactic, right? And Therefore he's exiled to Hyperion. And on the planet Hyperion, he finds a civilization of people they have crosses on their bodies, okay, which ultimately turn out to be these parasites. And what these parasites do is they burrow into your body, under your skin, and when you die, they resurrect a new version of you. But it's which has I think it has your memories as I recall, and it's physically you and it's mentally you. Question, is it really you? I don't know. But it's slightly degraded copy. And over generations, the copies degrade more and more. So if you've been there long enough, you end up as this kind of bald, sexless, mumbling imbecile with crosses on your body, right? And so the priest gets infected, and that's kind of the end of the French priest story. Again, they're not French, but it's like I should look this up. There's like a French priest, I think a priest with a French name and a priest with an English name. It's like Duray and Holby or something. We'll use those names. It's probably not right. So Holby
Tell
comes
us in the
later.
comments.
Yeah, tell us in the comments, Dave, you idiot. It was Thompson and Bruford, yeah, whatever. So Holby later is sent to investigate, and he finds that Duray is trying to remove, he has the cruciform parasite, and he's trying to remove it. And he's done it by tying himself to a tree, which they call the Tesla tree, which the atmosphere of Hyperion is highly electrically charged. The Tesla tree is a tree that regularly conducts electricity down out of the atmosphere. So he's basically, Duray has himself crucified on this tree and is being systematically electrocuted to try and kill the parasite, which ultimately comes out, but then goes into Holby, right? Holby leaves, but finds that if he is away from the planet, the parasite causes him constant pain. So now Holby is coming back to basically ask the Shrike to free him of this parasite, right? So again, that's one of the six stories that are in this kind of science fiction Canterbury Tales by Dan Simmons, which I mean, it's up there with like Ender's Game. It's just a perennial, or Dune, or the
Yeah.
perennial strong sellers, or Neuromancer for that matter. You regularly see them selling well in the science fiction charts. Yeah, and it's a great, kind of leans into the literary end of the spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that was seven.
That was seven.
That's seven science fiction books you'll love.
Yep.
I'm gonna sneak in an eighth.
Here
Oh,
we go.
and something you said about science fiction Canterbury Tales. I'm gonna sneak in the science fiction Winesburg, Ohio, which
Oh.
is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. Um, and so this is one of Bradbury's best known um, no books. It's not really a novel. It's a short story collection, and with the other being Paragraph 451 and probably The Illustrated Man, right? Maybe something wicked this way comes. I don't know. So this is this kaleidoscopic tale of human colonization of Mars, and it did not start out as a book. It started out as disparate short stories that he had written for for the for the pulps and for the glossies magazines. And Bradbury was really always a short story writer. I mean, Dandelion Wine is basically a fix-up novel. Martian Chronicles is. Um, he later on did write some novels. Maybe Dandelion Wine leans edges a little closer to novel territory, but he really was always a short story writer. He really always struggled to write a novel as a thing. Um, Even his, I guess, many of his novels almost feel like short story collections, and this was a short story collection. But he was getting big. He had broken out of the pulps. He was getting making a name for himself, and this is something that this is another conversation. But Ellison had trouble with too. Harlan Ellison is that man to be considered a serious, not a serious writer, but there is a stigma attached to if you have not written, you have to write a novel. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, right? And this has been true. This was always true, I think. You know, the novel will be the thing that makes you. And so Bradbury knew this, and his agent knew it, and Don Cognan, and he was trying to write Dandelion Wine. He was struggling, and then I think Norman Corwin, who's the famous radio play author, he suggested, why don't you do something like this? Take these stories, stitch them together, and do a Winesburg, Ohio. And Bradbury loved Winesburg, Ohio, with Sherman Anderson classic, which is sort of this. It's short stories telling the story of this town of Winesburg, Ohio. Bradbury does this with Mars. And he sort of rewrites some of the stories to make them fit together better. I hate to criticize Ray Bradbury. Last thing I want to say, some of them fit together better than others. So Usher too, always, which is not in every edition. Usher too is in some, but the other thing is it changed over time in different editions. He would pull out different stories, but like Usher 2 sticks out like a sore thumb. It's this weird gothic tale on Mars. You're like, what is this doing in here? Um, he had written several sort of first expedition to Mars stories that really are kind of different. And so he sort of tried to have his cake and eat it too. And he renamed these stories like the first expedition, the second expedition, the first few fail. Um, that works okay, but there's such marvelous stories that you're like, I'm fine reading this three times, or reading three different versions of First Contact, right? And then he wrote these little interstitial chapters that are like little prose poems that are great. Um, and so, man, this is so good. The ones I just want to single out, the two are one you might have had to read. This is often taught in high schools and even colleges, which is There Will Come Soft Rains. Um, and then, which is about, it's a cool story because, and this is why it's probably taught, there's no people in it. Um, it's told of the point of view of the how this what we would now think of as a smart home that is automated, and the family is gone, and I won't say why, and but all the stuff still works, right? Um, and it takes it through a day of this house's life. The other one, which I love, is it was again renamed something like the Third Expedition or something, second one of those, but it was originally called Mars is Heaven. And man, if you're gonna read one Ray Bradbury story, it might should be that one, right? And it is one of the expeditions, and they come and they land on Mars, and it is and keep in mind this was written, it was supposed to be set in like 1990s, and in the story, people live longer because of technology. But so in anyway, they land and it's like 1920s America, small town America, which is when they all grew up because they're, you know, even though they're physically 40s, they're only 7 years old or something like that. He little sleight of hand. Okay. Right. But and not only that, but it's like their relatives are there, right? And so hence Mars is heaven, right? Their grandparents are there. And what in the world is going on? And I won't spoil it for you. But it's one of the great Bradbury stories, similar to a story called Elegy by Charles Beaumont, who is another writer who was in Bradbury's orbit, that Southern California fan fantasists that include people like Matheson too. Anyway, so I think everybody's read, not everybody, but probably if you've read some Bradbury, it's Fahrenheit 451. Um, I would say The Martian Chronicles is right up there with that as far as a work of greatness. And so that is our seven and plus one
And a
bonus
bonus. And a
for you.
bonus. Okay,
So
awesome. David, thank you for that one.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for letting me sneak that in there. So this is great. I hope to do many more of these, Dave. This was a lot of fun. I'm now excited to go load my Kindle up or have maybe bookshop.org send me some physical copies of books, which is what is bookshop.org, you're asking. They are not sponsoring this, but they are an online retailer um, that is actually a nonprofit. And so you can order books through bookshop.org, and you can either designate an indie bookstore you want the profits from your purchase to go to, or you can just say, hey, split the pot, and they will split it with their indie bookstores they have partnered with. So it's a great way if you don't have an indie bookstore in your town to support independent bookstores. And another cool thing they do is if you will check down below here in the description of the video, we have created an ArcPress affiliate channel, I guess you might say, on bookshop.org. And we've created a list. Arc Press Gopher Wood Lounge recommends, and we're going to put all 8 of these books, link to them, or we'll link to that list, and they will all be in there. And in the future, as we do more of these, we'll add on more books we think that you'll like. And so take a look. If any of these caught your interest or all of them and you want to check them out, we just encourage you guys to click on that link. It supports independent bookstores, and it is an affiliate link, so it helps support Arc Press a little bit as well. So, our motives aren't completely altruistic, I'll say.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. And all of you, thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again next time. And remember, the humans win in the end.